Hello and welcome to episode 293 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
My name is Jordan Willis.
And boy, oh boy, do we have a wonderful guest this week. Jeff Fillion is joining the podcast once again.
Howdy, I'm Jeff.
Jeff, you're here to talk with us about tabletop games and the relationship and back and forth nature with video games. That's going to be our main topic this week. But before we get to that, we got a lot of news. Nintendo has put out another quarterly financial report. We'll go over some of that. The Switch 2 Nintendo Direct announcement was announced again with tiny bit more info. We got some more games coming to NSO. There's a bunch of patents that show a lot of stuff, actually. We're going to get into all that. But before that, how's everybody doing? How has your week been?
This weekend, I went to San Antonio to hang out with my family. And then, coincidentally, a good friend of mine, Daniel, was in town. And, he lives in the Bay Area. And so I got to meet up with him and his wife, Jenny, some of my favorite friends. And we went to get a dessert, a Filipino dessert called Halo Halo. It's incredible. It is so good. So it's like ube flavored. So on the bottom, first of all, it's served in a large glass dish, right? And then on the bottom is shaved ice. And on top of that is ube flavored condensed milk. And then on top of that, they throw an ube, a scoop of ube ice cream. And then all throughout it, there is cube jellies, a piece of flan, some pistachio, coconut. And then the weirdest thing that actually was super good was they put beans in there. So there was red beans, pinto beans, things like that. And so it's this what I was told it translates to is mix. So it's the whole dessert is just a mix of all these different things. But ube being the main component, it was beautiful. It was incredible. I'll have to post a photo in the Discord when this episode goes up because
what is it called again?
Halo Halo, but it's spelled Halo.
Okay. I'm finding out where I can get this near me.
Yeah, you could definitely find one in Chicago. I was I don't really know a ton of Filipino restaurants in Austin, but he told me, he was we went to this one in San Antonio. It's legit. Let's go. And I was okay. Yeah. Anyway.
That sounds so up my alley.
But yeah, other than that, just working. Summer, how you doing?
Yeah. I also had a first this past weekend. So one of my best friends, we celebrated her bachelorette party this weekend and did have it was so busy. It was so packed full of activities. But some of the ones that I would like to highlight, I did high tea for the first time. A full experience where the chef would bring everything out and explain every single dish to us. So it was all of the courses and it was unlimited tea and every single tea that I had was incredible. And having all of the treats explained to us. It's hard to call it a meal. Every little thing was a treat, even the sandwiches, even though they were savory. It was everything was an incredible treat. And having them all explained to us. And there was specifically this little beet sandwich that me and another girl were freaking out about. So the chef brought the recipe out and was take a photo. Because we were freaking out about this beet sandwich. So I can't wait to recreate it myself. And then we ended the night with a PowerPoint party because that's just all the rage in my friend group right now. And I'm bringing it up because I did a PowerPoint on fictional men that the bride would leave the groom for because it was super, I was having a hard time coming up with something that I'm super nerdy and I'm incapable of doing anything without bringing fandom into it. And I thought it was the perfect blend of combining our love of fandom with something that the normie women would enjoy because it's that level of scandal that they want out of a bachelorette party. So it was the perfect combination. And then I slept all day Sunday, slept through the Super Bowl. I think that happened. Got caught up on the halftime show and am still obsessed. But yeah, that's me.
Wow. I feel I was just this whole time I've been racking my brains to try to think if I ate anything interesting recently. And I think the answer is no.
Oh, so, you need to explore, Patrick.
I did not have that like interesting of a week. I think it was fine. It was good. I'm trying to think of any highlight at all, but nothing's coming to mind because all I can think about is what did I eat? Nothing special. Bunch of homemade stuff that was fine, but I had a good week. I guess I'll just leave it there. What about you, Jeff? How have you been doing?
Yeah, pretty okay, I guess. Got a new graphics card. The new Intel GPUs came in stock at their MSRP and not like 150 over. So installed that into my incredibly tiny mini ITX tower. Almost had to like hire a Victorian chimney sweep to get the tiny fingers in there, but got it working. It's a thing. Not every game works great on it because it's not, a long lasting GPU brand like NVIDIA or AMD's. But it's in there. It fits. Computer didn't explode.
That's a win.
Yeah. Always good.
Love it.
Success.
Love it when things don't explode.
Yeah, I've burnt out like power supply units trying to replace things before. So, not doing that. Always good. Yeah, and then instead of watching the big game, whatever they call it yesterday, decided to rewatch The Last Boy Scout, a nice Shane Black football themed movie instead. Classic Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans if y'all are looking for something football themed to watch.
Very nice.
Yep.
Well, moving us along. Last week, we did an episode about Xbox and the future of Xbox and their exclusives. And we had Rule of Two Review, Rob, on for that. And they left us a nice comment on the YouTube saying thanks for having them on. We also got a comment from our friend Matt Hobby who said that Patrick's evolving into Ivysaur at his job. I guess that's true. I am learning a lot about plants. So I know a lot more than when I first started and it was all just plants. Now I know their names. So that's a step in the right direction. And we got a comment from our friend Hatstack Mike, who said even though he's not a big Xbox person, he really wants them to stay in the game because it helps the competition aspect of things. Though counterpoint, he did also mention he's gotten used to Sega being available on everything else. So we say that now, but in 10 years, maybe we appreciate having Xbox stuff everywhere. I would, but and then I liked this. We had actually a lot of good conversation about stuff on our Discord as well. And I loved Hans's comment over there and he said, do we have a running tally or spreadsheet of all the times that David has promised to eat something on the podcast? Because that is David's go-to. He's not here, so we can say that. But I still think Astrobot's going to come to PC and he's going to eat his whatever it was. We'll see. But if you too want to be shouted out related to something we talk about on this episode, then definitely leave us a YouTube comment or join our Discord and be part of the conversation over there. Send us a DM. We always like hearing from our listeners and viewers. We also like it if you would share the podcast with a friend or post about it somewhere online like Reddit. We have a Patreon where you can financially support the podcast and become a patron. And also, if you're just listening to the podcast, but you would like to see the podcast, you can head over to YouTube and watch us and hit like and subscribe while you're there. And then we are going to talk about the gaming news for the week. We're going to start off with Nintendo's quarterly financial report. So they just had the report come out this past week, which I think I don't know. Let's start with maybe the thing they always kind of update, which is like their numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So they talk about how much hardware they've sold and how much software they've sold and that sort of thing. And the Nintendo Switch has now sold over 150 million units. So it is still in third place of all time for consoles and stuff, but it's not terribly far off, right? If it gets another 5, it'll beat the DS. And if it gets another 10 or so, it would beat the PlayStation 2. Jordan, it looks like you have some thoughts. What do you think?
It's inching up there. I will be validated. It might not be this year. It might not be next year, but by 2027, I will have validation that this is the best selling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing we have to keep in mind is that the DS and the PlayStation 2 continued to sell units. Like they didn't become the numbers that they are now before their successors.
Yeah. And if Nintendo wants to discount the original Switch, that would also really help, I think. Mm-hmm. that reach it. But it does feel inevitable to me.
Mhm.
I don't know. Does 10 million more Switches sold? That feels inevitable, but maybe I'm wrong.
Especially if there's a price drop between that and like the successor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I don't know. It might take a while though. Like you said, Jordan, it might take a couple of years, but I think it's going to happen.
Mhm.
So they also always update their software, which is always funny to look at, especially now this late in the game, because it doesn't really change much. I think we've kind of settled into what is probably going to be the top 10. I mean, who knows for Switch software, but it sure feels like it. But Mario Kart 8 is just constantly selling, and it's now up to 67 million copies sold.
That's
on
wild.
the Switch. It is. It's insane. But I guess of note for this quarter is that Mario Party Jamboree did really well.
Mhm.
I think they had like 5 or 6 million already sold on that one. I'm pulling it up right now. It's over 6 million already sold for that. And that came out in October, I want to say.
Wow. It
Wow.
is the best Mario Party on the Switch.
And people buy them. So I understand why they make more and don't just add to them or have them be bigger games. Like would be nice, but whatever. And
Like Mario Kart.
yeah, of relevance to today's episode too, right? A Mario Party. But we'll talk about that probably later. Like, yeah, even in this quarter, I think the Mario Kart 8 sold 5 million.
Oh my
copies.
gosh.
That's just nuts, dude. I had to look it up. So Mario Kart 8 with including the Wii U is like at 75,810,000. So like if you're just to count the Switch units alone, it is the 6th best selling game of all time. But the big thing that it like stands out to me, it is a game that is only on one console. If you can't count those 67 millions, everything else like above it is like Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, PUBG, like things that are on so many different consoles that it's easy to spread the units around. Like this is just that many on one console.
I think I've purchased 4 copies of Minecraft, right? Like myself. Like it's so like those numbers are like just because we bought it on mobile, we bought it on Switch, we bought it on PC, we bought me a copy on PC to play with my, like yes, part of the reason Minecraft is up there. 4 units of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving back to this quarterly report, I don't know if there's anything y'all saw in the numbers or anything you want to talk about. Definitely interrupt. But I guess we could talk about some of the things that came out of maybe the Q&A. There were some good questions and that makes sense. I think we things we all already knew and could have expected, but a little bit of confirmation. One of which is that it was directly asked about, are you going to continue to support the Switch? And they essentially answer that. I think it's Furukawa, the president, who answers that question kind of like we all would have predicted, right? Which is that there will continue to be games that come out for the Switch, but exclusivity is important. So we will have some games that will be exclusive, and it's probably just going to be a little messy, like David especially was predicting of like, why is this game a Switch 2 only? But it just is because they want to sell it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I took that answer, at least. They also were asked about, demand and how they're going to meet it. And it sounds like they're trying to meet that demand. I know there's a lot of concern in Nintendo fans and some discussion about that, about pre-ordering this whenever that goes live, presumably around April, right? I don't know. We actually had a conversation about that in the Discord. I don't know if like there were people talking about maybe doing it through Nintendo Switch Online and stuff like that. Do y'all think they would do something like that?
Absolutely. They're already right, because they're already hinting at like measures to stop scalpers, and that would be absolutely the way to do it, is through your Nintendo account or through your NSO subscription account, limiting the number that you're able to purchase through that, like, and that being like the initial way, right? And like I could see there being like a window for that before releasing it like to the public.
I kind of am on the opposite end. I don't think they would do that because historically no one's ever done it that way. And I think they might write somewhere in the middle if they do anything like this at all. Like I wish they would do this, but I just don't see it happening. But I think that if they would do it, they would maybe have like a limited number that are only for NSO subscribers. And like once those are sold, they're sold. And then it's like general public, you know? So I think they might like take a section of their units and do that. But I don't know if I see that for like the entire initial run.
So there's a little bit of like precedent set with some of the PS5 stuff, like having to sign up with your PSN account to be able to get on a waiting list to pick up a PS5 pre-order. So, I mean, other Japanese companies have done that. But I could also see like maybe pre-orders only through Switch Online, but it'll hit, you know, your GameStops, your Walmarts, whatever, like day one everywhere, just without pre-orders.
Yeah, I think they're doing that hands-on test, right? In April and various, or experience or whatever you want to call it, not test, in various places. And that was signing up for that with your NSO account, which I could also see being a little bit of a dry run for signing up for things with an NSO account. But we'll see. The other question I thought was somewhat interesting, and this is, of course, they answer these questions in such vague ways that you can't be sure. But somebody asked directly about mobile games and mobile support, and Nintendo obviously has not made or it kind of has been pulling back on their mobile games. But they just kind of said that they're still, you know, considering it and open to it. So I don't know what that means. It's not a strong promise one way or the other, but
I did see one other interesting question, and it was like pricing of products given recent inflation and exchange rate situation. And I'm like, that's like a low key way to say tariffs. And I was like, kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's what we're all wondering is like, if these tariffs do hit and it's towards Japan, like, are all these products going to go up in price? And of course they gave like a very like nothing answer. But I mean, I think it was like important that it was asked, you know, like, is that going to have an effect on the price of the products in other countries? I don't know. I just thought that was interesting as well. But no, nothing to report really.
Well, sort of around this same time, Nintendo put out an official announcement for the Direct that they have already announced for the Switch 2, which is happening on April 2nd. But they had a more traditional thing, like they, you know, have a time and the image of it. So it's going to be happening at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, or 8 a.m. Central, which somebody pointed out is like, what, 22 in Japan or something like that. So everybody thinks all of this is all tying into they're leaning into their twos, like they had the video was 2 minutes.
Oh, because it's okay.
2 seconds long. And
sure.
Yeah, military time or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, I think it was interesting to see this Direct announcement because I think there has been a lot of rumors about maybe a normal Nintendo Direct for the Switch 1 happening maybe soon. But I kind of feel like them reiterating this made it feel to me like there's not going to be. I don't know if that changed y'all's opinion or if anybody thinks differently, but
I don't know. Hard to say. You never know with Nintendo, I think.
They can do whatever they want. Yeah.
They do what they want. Yes, they reiterated it, but also it is Nintendo fashion to have an announcement for your announcement. Right? Like that's not out of the norm for them either.
I feel like if we don't get an announcement about a Direct this week, I don't see it happening because I don't think it's going to happen after the Pokemon presentation. So I think if it doesn't happen this week, it's not going to happen at all.
Because otherwise it would be too close, to the Pokemon presents.
And I just I don't see them doing one in March either. I feel like it might just be April to focus on all that. But I'm even like, are they going to show off games at that thing? There's just like so many unanswered questions because there is they do need some end of life Switch games, especially because we don't know exactly when this thing's coming out, but it can't be within a month of the announcement. I don't know, man. I could go either way, but my gut says no.
That's where I'm feeling too. I feel like this is what we have to look forward to, and to the extent that they're going to announce anything before then, it's just going to be like one or two 3DS port games that are just announced. Here it is, kind of a thing.
Bring Samus Returns to Switch,
Yeah.
but I want it to come.
Well, next up is some patents that were discovered that show off Switch 2 Joy-Cons as well as Switch 1 looking Joy-Cons and some other things. Just this big patent filing from Nintendo that has gone public that I think has a lot of really interesting things in it. And I've looked at some of the pictures people have pulled out. I scrolled through it and there's a lot of stuff in there. One of the big things, and this is spoiler territory for people who want to wait to hear from Nintendo, so skip ahead a minute, I guess. But that mouse mode stuff is all but confirmed from this. You're seeing people holding Joy-Cons like a mouse, like a keyboard, or a mouse that you would use with your PC. And so I think that's 100% clear that that's what they're going for with the new Joy-Cons. I think it's really weird because we see some pictures with that alleged C button, but we see some without it in the images. And I'm kind of confused by that because some of the Joy-Cons look more like Switch 1 Joy-Cons and have it. And some of them look more like Switch 2 Joy-Cons, but don't have it. And maybe I'm over analyzing that because, they're patents. They may not reflect the exact final product, right? Also, the thing that I think is really interesting that also shows that they're really going full force with the mouse mode is there's a picture of what looks to be like a controller, like a pro controller that can split in half and then like almost like a gun or something be put down on a table to be like a mouse. Wild. if that's where if
true.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, like, can you imagine having a controller that's got a magnet in it that's strong enough or weak enough that you can pull it apart? Or do you think there'll probably be a release button if it's true? But I'm looking at that, and I was looking at that, and just like that must mean they really want this mouse mode to work, so that if you are in your couch with an actual like controller, not the Joy-Cons, you can still do it.
They want
with
me
their
to play
official
Baldur's Gate
ones.
3 on my Switch.
I don't know.
Or Civ 7.
That might actually be the answer. Civ 7.
Yeah, or lots of things, right? I'm really interested to see what they intend with this because it still seems really messy to me to play a console experience without like a table or a mouse pad or something. Like, are we all misreading how you do this? Does it work okay like on any surface, do you think? Or like, Jordan?
I think it's like fascinating because I was like going back and thinking about Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, and they had like the section about Diablo 3 and how they had to like introduce mechanics to make it work on a controller, and it kind of just changed a lot of the like gameplay just because of the one mechanic. Like I think it was like a roll or something. Anyway, just to make it like feel correct. And it's interesting to see like Nintendo be like, no, let's like explore in the opposite way of like, no, let's add mouse control to ours and be able to play games as they were like intended to be played. And this will be one of the only consoles that makes that a core feature, because I think you can do it on certain other consoles, but it's kind of a pain. You kind of have to like hook up a traditional like mouse and keyboard setup to make it work. But this would be somewhere in the middle. So I'm kind of like really fascinated to see like what they're actually trying to do with this, if it's going to be used for games that are traditionally mouse and keyboard, or if it's going to be used in some completely different way that we haven't even seen yet.
And it'll be a game that will be a launch title that only a handful of people will buy, and
then they never get used again. Yeah, quite possible.
Yep.
Is this going to be the next Snipper Clips? Is that like,
yeah, I think so.
Or what's the one where you tilt the marbles and you can feel them?
Yes,
from
1-2 switch.
Yeah.
We'll see. This is all unofficial. This is a patent, but it really does show this stuff off. So if you want to look at it, there's some interesting images you can see. Up next is Wario Land 4 has been announced to join Nintendo Switch Online. So this is for the Game Boy Advance. So you have to have the higher tier expansion pack subscription, but it's nice to see more games being added and more good games, right? I've actually never played this game, but like games that you're like, oh, I might actually try that out instead of some weird old NES game. Not that you might not try those out, but they're less, at least for me,
with no English translation. I'm so stoked on this because I actually have not played this game and I've always wanted to, and this is going to be finally going to be my excuse to play Wario Land 4. So I'm actually pretty excited for this to come.
Yeah, it comes out on Valentine's Day, so date night right there. Nintendo
easy
heard
date
our
night.
cries and said, "Yeah, go with the character who canonically farts every 5 seconds for Valentine's Day."
It's got like a pinkish nose, right? Sure.
Garlic, the most romantic vegetable or whatever, spice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It kind of is.
Depends who you're talking to.
Well, moving along to Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. They have put a demo up on the eShop, which is interesting. Usually these go out in advance of the game coming out, but this time they have done it a couple of weeks after. I don't know if that means anything for the sales or not, or if it was just why not? Let's slap a demo on there. Maybe that'll get us a few more players. But if you listened to our Donkey Kong Country Returns HD episode and you were still on the fence, hey, there's a demo you can try. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's another time that I can remember something like this happening where the demo came out after the fact. And I can't think of a time that this has happened. I mean, like, I'm sure it has happened, but I feel like it's usually with games that have like already been out for like a while. So this happening like a couple of weeks later, I do think is interesting. It almost makes me wonder if like the demo, they meant to have a demo and it just like, for whatever reason, the demo wasn't ready at launch. And so
I think that's it.
Yeah. Not that I like fully understand what all goes into that, but that was my immediate thought was, oh, maybe the demo just like wasn't ready at launch.
Yeah.
Those are hard.
Yeah. Like I was about to say, it's like making another game. I mean, at some point, maybe you've coded enough that you can be like, just check a box, right? Like that's what I've tried to do with mine, but it took a while to get there.
Oh yeah.
And if I ever want to make any significant changes to the demo, then that would no longer be the case. But I think it's entirely possible this was like a goal they had, and then it just didn't, in an effort to get the game done, they didn't get the demo done, and now it's done. That's a good guess. But sticking with Donkey Kong Country Returns for a minute, the Tetris 99 is continuing to get support on the first Maximus Cup of this year. I don't even know how many Maximus Cups there have been at this point. 40. This is the 45th, actually. Wow. So Tetris 99 will have a Donkey Kong Country Returns event this weekend. That is February 13th through the 17th. So one of the things that this just always strikes me about whenever this happens is just that Tetris 99 still exists and still gets support and must have enough players for them to at least want to do these themes, right?
I feel really bad for Donkey Kong Country Returns sharing the president number with Donald Trump. So, like as soon as you said 45th, I was like, oh no.
It's a cursed number now. Yeah,
I guess so. Anyway, I wish David was here to gush on Tetris 99, but they're still kicking, man. They're still going, man. I like to see them support it still to this day.
So next up, a couple of soundtracks from Nintendo are getting official releases, which is unusual, especially since we now have Nintendo Music. You'd think maybe they weren't going to do stuff like this, but now I guess they're just deciding that this is the time to get music out there. It's pretty rare, especially here in the States, that we can buy, vinyl or CDs of Nintendo soundtracks. But Super Mario World is getting a release in, I think it's May, and you can buy either a CD or the vinyl for that. and you have to, I think, buy it, I don't know, through certain retailers and all that kind of thing. But it's available. And then I guess it's Square technically that's doing this, but Super Mario RPG is also getting a vinyl release, like a box set or whatever. That's going to be, I think, in April. So for all our vinyl heads out there, do people even buy CDs anymore? When I was reading about the Super Mario World, I was like, I guess somebody does, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I feel like vinyl is kind of the physical.
People are still buying
media.
CDs as well because like I think it's an interesting wave of like just in general it's part of the wanting physical media side, but there are your folks who are still like hardcore advocating for CDs, and that while vinyl are like a big fun collectible, CDs do technically have the better sound quality it like as far as like production and everything. So yeah, there are still CD heads out there. I live with one. I collect vinyl because I like having a big fun collecting like collectible object. And then my roommate buys CDs. So yeah, we're out here.
Okay.
Also a resurgence of cassette tapes that's been coming back like, recently.
I see that a lot with indie artists and like small creators. Yeah. Jordan.
Jordan lore, I did make cassette tapes for a number of years. I had a large cassette duplicator that could make 7 cassettes at once at high speed, and I ran a small tape label for a little while. Anyway, so yes, cassettes.
Nice.
Yeah, because I was like, all my friends are in bands, and I was like, well, people need cassettes. Let's make it happen.
Gotta have that mixtape.
I feel this way about CDs, but I feel this way really about tapes. Where would I listen to a tape? Like, I don't like
on a tape deck.
Yeah,
Walkman, bro.
I hear you, but like, I don't. Like,
they still sell boom boxes. So like, yes, my roommate got one for Christmas. It's a CD player that also has Bluetooth connectivity, a standard AM FM radio, and a cassette player. And the cassette player is like it's a fully functional. You can record to it, so you could be making mixtapes from the radio or your Bluetooth, which I think is really fun. I want to bring it back though to the news topic and say like that I do think it's really fascinating that Nintendo has agreed and like is putting out official vinyls. Vinyls are super popular in the VGM community. Again, having just come back from MagFest, I bought 2 different vinyl collections at like I got the official Undertale soundtrack on vinyl, and then I got a fan cover album for Final Fantasy VI called Esper Wave. And just like, especially the fan albums though, I mean, there's like how many different labels out there just for fan, covers alone. So, I wonder if, Nintendo sees that. I'm thinking about our conversations that we used to have about the strike downs on like sheet music and stuff. Nintendo, I think they're getting their fingers into putting out official things like both this and the app, the music app. It makes me think are we going to get like official releases of sheet music soon too? Like, I think it's all coming.
Yeah. Also, these things are pricey. Like, the Super Mario RPG one is like $155, dude. And then also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is actually not the original soundtrack. It's the Switch remake of Super Mario RPG soundtrack, which is interesting. And then, the other the Super Mario World one, the link that we have is like for a Japanese version, and it's like almost $80. So yeah, these are kind of up there. I mean, I think there is money to be made in releasing these on vinyls because these will both sell out, like no question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we can move on to some non-Nintendo news to close us out here. We're going to start off with something that's close to home for those of us here in the Austin area, and that is that Rooster Teeth has apparently been repurchased, like the IP of Rooster Teeth and whatever the brand, right, and whatever assets go along with it, by the original founder of Rooster Teeth. So I guess it was last year when it was announced that it was going to be, like shut down and what have you. And so this is only, I don't know, a handful of months after that. But as somebody in the Austin game community put it, it's like he bought the IP. This doesn't really mean that Rooster Teeth is coming back. Like, maybe he will be able to get that off the ground and get some of these franchises and stuff back, whatever they have rights to. But yeah, I think the point stands that like, don't expect anything to happen soon. And I don't know. I've known multiple people that worked at Rooster Teeth, and it all sounded like a little bit of a dicey situation over there. So I don't know, what this means.
Very famously a dicey situation, because there is multiple news articles on the internet about all of the allegations of toxic workplace environment. When I read this news article, I was like, okay, wait, which of the co-founders is buying it? Like, and so it's Bernie Burns. And so I was like, okay, let me go recheck all the toxic workplace allegations, because there's a couple different articles that kind of like list everything. And I was like, oh, he's actually like the one that like wasn't implicated in all of this. So I'm like, I don't know. I feel kind of both ways about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel both ways about it though, because I'm like, even if he wasn't a participant, he only left in 2020, and there's like no way he didn't know about it, but maybe that's why he left? Question mark. That's like huge speculation with no basis in whatever.
Sure. But I love talking about it, so I think we should say those things and get people talking about it, because I'm right there with you. I know a lot of people that were hurt by this company and and everything that was going on there. So like, yeah, we should talk about it. And start rumors.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if this person is able to launch it again and what happens with it. Yeah, I have really mixed feelings about Rooster Teeth, just because it's like, I mean, we've had multiple people on this podcast, like who got their start or were involved in Rooster Teeth, and it, so it's like wonderful talent has gone through there. But yeah, just we've all said it. So
also like, it's not like a lot of their IPs already have been sold to other things. Like Viz owns Rawoobi, like Funhouse and Hunter are not part of this. It's just, I guess, whatever was specifically under. So maybe Red versus Blue might be part of that. And maybe some stuff that was just 100% Rooster Teeth label that got shut down and didn't get acquired by some parent company or something else.
The official press release, which we should take with a grain of salt, says, right, like, and much of its remaining assets.
Is that the warehouse?
Which is pretty vague and probably intentionally so, right? Because to your point, like some of the big stuff is gone, right? So
the warehouse is gone as well. I can't tell you how I know that, but it is gone as well.
All right. Well, we can move on to the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, most well known for E3. This is the sort of industry organization that used to put on E3 and now does not put on E3 because E3 is gone. They did announce this past week that they are going to launch a different conference, and this one is called iIcon. I guess that's what we call it. iIcon, and I'll be honest, it feels kind of icky to me. It is the press release that they put out uses the word visionary way too much for my taste. It sounds like this is an event just for high level people in the video game business, and it's happening in Las Vegas, which also feels a little icky to me. I don't know. It's not Las Vegas is fine, but just the package of all these things together.
Sure.
And then, there are several big gaming companies who have, CEOs or executives who are quoted in this press release about their being excited to be there, like Take-Two and Amazon and Ubisoft. And Square
Doug
Enix
Bowser is a chairman of the board,
and Sarah Bond. So I guess the idea is to get all these visionaries together in Vegas to talk about stuff. Yeah.
We talking like a skull and bones situation? Like, what kind of party are we going for here? Like, what's the vibe, dude? Like, I don't know.
Isn't it's going to take forever to come out? Different Skull and Bones?
I think you meant the Secret Society.
Not the Ubisoft game that took like 40 years to make.
Skull and Bones in at Yale, right? So like, I think Skull and Bones, they don't want you to touch. And maybe it's a different secret society at Yale. They don't want you to touch the door. I touched their door.
Is that the one with the guy from Dawson's Creek in the movie? Skulls, I think it was called, based on the Skull and Bones.
Oh man, that's a deep pool. I do not know. You got me with the Ubisoft Skull and Bones. I think the thing I learned the most from this is that Doug Bowser is the chairman of the board of the ESA. It's like, I didn't realize.
But also Nintendo. Oh no, Nintendo is listed as one of their change makers. This whole thing is weird.
Yeah,
like I've got mixed feelings about the whole thing. It does feel like a whole like attempt at like washed hands corporatization, trying to reclaim game announcements, like taking away from, don't get me wrong, I know that Jeff Keighley isn't everybody's like favorite person, but at least his roots are in game journalism. This is like the fact that this is like all execs. I mean, it's going to be for execs, but I don't like that I see the word healthcare listed as like something that they're attempting to include in this. I hate this, but we're just gonna have to keep thumb on it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's happening in April. It's really just for the big wigs at these companies. Jordan?
April 2026.
Oh, sorry. That's right. Next year.
Yeah.
So this is like a planning thing, right? It just got announced. So we'll see if this becomes a thing or not.
This seems like in line with ESA, because E3 initially was kind of specifically press and industry until it became more of a like,
Yeah, it does feel
Yeah.
like them trying to go back to some closed door thing.
I think this is like the most interesting part about this is because it's like by invitation only for visionaries, thought leaders, and innovators. No mention of the press whatsoever. Or is that thought leaders? Like, I don't like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's about the press personally, just from reading them.
Yes. And I think because we're becoming just increasingly anti-press with everything, like, that it's corporatized. I think they're keeping it intentionally vague, like thought leaders, blah, blah, blah. So that way it can specifically be like their boys club of exactly the people that they want to be at this and the people they don't. You're just not thought leader enough, like.
Well, they already laid off all the non-thought leaders in the industry. So I think it'll be a great weekend in Vegas. Let's go.
Yeah. That's what feels partly icky about it to me too.
Yeah.
But we've trashed this thing enough. We can move on to the last bit of news here, which is that the PlayStation Network, PSN, had a pretty big outage this past week, which in the grand scheme of things is not that big of a deal. But I know that when you run a gaming company that requires even some single player things to connect so that people can play them, and things like the PlayStation Portal has to connect and all that kind of stuff. So I think people were pretty upset that for about 24 hours, the PlayStation Network went down. I don't know. I kind of watching some of the comments while this happened because I was making the show notes while this was happening. And so I was like, 14 hours, 16 hours, like as I updated it every once in a while. And I was just seeing some of the comments online. People were, understandably, this happened over a weekend where maybe some people had a chance to play games and that kind of thing. So I get people being upset, but I also kind of get that, we live in a complicated world and things happen.
Sure.
I don't know, but Sony has been unclear about what caused it. And I don't think they have to be clear, but I know that's one thing people are upset about.
I feel
I
like
don't
with
know.
their history, they should at least acknowledge why it was. Because I mean, sometimes the PSN network goes down because all of their personal information got hacked from all their accounts, and it would be nice to know if that happened again. So I can understand why people would be upset for that reason alone.
Yeah, that's
even when you need a disc, but your disc still needs to connect to the internet to install the game off of the disc. Like I don't know.
right. That was one of the complaints here, and I think that also just proves that at least some physical media is still pointless, right? Like if it then requires you connecting, and I do worry about this sometimes with my Switch, and like, or the whole idea of like, well, if you have a Switch, you're fine, but like it does have to validate if it's not your primary Switch or whatever, and kind of jumping back some topics, thinking about Switch 2, are we going to only have one primary Switch? I don't know. And thinking also about like, well, if you lose your primary Switch and then you want to play a game and you're locked out, I don't know. We do live in a world where I think a lot of stuff is not available if the internet goes down.
Yep.
Like stuff that you don't realize.
Yeah.
Like on both of those topics, like I had worked at GameStop during the last like multi-day PlayStation outage on like PS4. That was terrible. Everybody's like, when's it coming back on? I'm like, I'm not Sony, buddy. I just sell you the game. I don't know what to tell you. It sucks. Maybe they'll give you something. Sorry.
Mhm.
But also like on that with the Switch primary thing, like with the 3DS, if you wanted to like transfer your like profile, your eShop account, even like Wii U, you actually had to do like a transfer. So when people were trading in, we had to do these elaborate like, like, okay, so we'll get you on the Wi-Fi. It's going to take like all day. So if you got something to do, we'll let you transfer and start that account. We'll hide these in the back. And then when it's done, we can let you trade in the system that you just transferred from for the new Zelda model that you're transferring to. It kind of makes things a hassle sometimes by making things more convenient.
Yes. Well, unless there's anything else on the PSN outage, I think that is going to do it for our news section. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking all about tabletop games and their influence on and the way that video games have influenced tabletop games and that whole thing when we come back. We are back, and this week we are talking all about tabletop games and the intersection between them and video games and the sort of how they have each influenced each other. And this is a big topic, so I imagine we'll just kind of touch on some parts of it and kind of see where it goes. But Jeff, one of the reasons we are having you on for this topic is, if you're watching the video version, I think you already have a sense of maybe why, because behind Jeff is a large collection of tabletop and board games. But Jeff, I know you've done some work in video games as well as some design stuff for tabletop games. Is that right?
Yes. So kind of just for getting into game design as a profession, it started when I was kind of between jobs. So I was kind of working out of my buddy's studio, and we had started doing some like board game designs together and ended up kind of getting traction on one, ended up getting sold, just never built. But it turns out like writing rules and designing tabletop games is a lot like making game design docs for video games. And that kind of like led into something you don't have to worry about manufacturing physical things for, which is video games.
Very nice. And just to the total aside, but Jeff, we had you on, you're also an artist, and we had you on previously because you did the art in Astro Duel 2, which everyone should check out. And as a result of that, I hired Jeff to do some art for my game, for Monochrome Heights. So Jeff has been working on that too, but that's just totally an aside because we're going to be talking about tabletop games. And I think the place that I want to start is D&D and role-playing games, because when I thought about this topic, the thing that jumps out to me is how much every RPG you play on a video game is pretty much heavily influenced by the tabletop game Dungeons and Dragons. I think I found this interesting I want to say like opinion review about the original Final Fantasy, which was breaking down all the ways they directly lifted things from early D&D. And I mean, I think that's true. I remember, and also just like anecdotally, I was introduced to both of those things around the same time. Like, and I don't think I like made that connection as a kid, but like, I remember playing Final Fantasy 1 around with the same friend who I used to play D&D with, right? Like that was like, I am the right age for somebody who could discover both of those at the same time when that was happening, kind of. But I don't know. What do y'all think? Like, I mean, it's kind of hard to overstate how much D&D I think has influenced video games.
It's one of those things. Like for me, I was a late bloomer to RPGs because I was like, why do I want to choose an option from a list of text when I could just punch a guy in Street Fighter? That's seemed like a kind of a boring game. And then I played like Final Fantasy VI. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Yep, this makes sense to me. But then kind of seeing like tabletop RPGs, I probably didn't get to until maybe like a little less than a decade ago. Like I'm very new to tabletop RPGs because it takes like a DM, people to run it, like people interested in playing it, meeting up, all of that. But I was familiar with them. And it seemed like, just looking at stuff, like even hearing people talking about it, like, oh yeah, the dice rolls really just messed me up in this, Dragon Age encounter or that kind of thing. It's like, I know there's no actual dice rolls, but behind the scenes, like a lot of the combat numbers, the stats, they're all driven kind of on like virtual dice rolls just happening behind the scenes for every sword swipe you do, every like fireball you cast. And it's kind of like, yeah, there's just like some nerd sitting in the code just like, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and also I think D&D made video games, right? Like I tried to look this up, and I think Pool of Radiance is the earliest one, at least from what I quickly kind of gleaned from looking into this, which I want to say was like in the late 80s, maybe very early 90s. But I think a lot of the things that we think of in modern RPGs and video games are the stats, the like you said, the combat, all that really comes from it, and it's evolved, right? And I think that's interesting, and kind of one of the ways I want to talk about this stuff is like how video games have kind of evolved some of these tabletop things that then kind of circled back around into tabletop games. Like I think, when you're playing D&D, like you said, you have to get a DM and players. But when you play a JRPG, it's just you, right? And I feel like now there are a lot more single player tabletop games than maybe there used to be. I could be wrong. That's just a perception thing, maybe. Yeah. But I feel like there's been more of like that's one way it's influenced each other there.
I think the pandemic had a lot to do with like single player tabletop stuff happening too. Like can't meet with people, so we got to put some single player modes in there.
Well, Summer, I know you play a lot of D&D, right? Do you ever think about the aspects of D&D that are in RPGs, or is it something that you don't really analyze?
So what's funny about you putting me on the spot about this is that my experience specifically with D&D was about at the time that Baldur's Gate 3 came out. And something that I do like to talk about and highlight is that Baldur's Gate 3, it did take me several hours to get into it. It's super crunchy at first for somebody that is like new to the genre, but it was making me a better D&D player. Everything that Baldur's Gate 3 was teaching me about like how to think and interact with my environment. It was teaching me to do that in my campaign. I felt like it was making me a better player in that real life with other people campaign, but also vice versa. The way that the DM was guiding us, I felt like was teaching me about how to play, how to think about how I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 as well. I've done other TTRPGs. I dabbled with Star Wars for a while. Currently doing a campaign in a system called Masks, which is basically superhero high school. And I have always enjoyed tabletop games, just like beyond like your standard party games, right? Like I have always enjoyed games like Settlers of Catan, and I play Wingspan a lot with my friends. Always interested to see what other friends are, wanting to play that is beyond, so when somebody says they want to have a game night and somebody is like, yeah, we got to play Cards Against Humanity, I'm the first one that's like, I'm out of here. Or like, I try to find a different, I make sure I bring a different game to play. So I'm not like crazy deep into the sauce, like with tabletop games, but like I definitely do enjoy them. Yeah, like I used to play a lot of Hero Clicks, which I guess is technically a tabletop game. Like I literally have been thinking about getting back into it because I miss it. Yeah, I used to play a lot of Hero Clicks. I used to play a lot of Hero Clicks. So that's me. That's me. Oh, are you going to show us your Hero Clicks collection?
No, I was going to say I think I still have my Halo and Street Fighter clicks from the Hero Clicks line. Speaking of video game crossovers,
yeah.
The Halo clicks actually changed the rules up for those too to make it more streamlined, because like regular Hero Clicks had like 8 million phases, and Halo Clicks was like, nah, it's just team deathmatch.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Jeff, I would be kind of curious talking about game design, because I think one thing I've talked about on this podcast at some point is, games are kind of like movies. Games are also kind of like sports, but also games are, and when I'm saying games, video games, they're also very much like tabletop games, and probably the most akin of anything, right? Because the game part of it, like, when you kind of have dabbled in both in terms of game design, are there any significant differences or striking similarities that you think about when you're trying to come up with rules or ideas for game design for the different mediums?
And I think like things that are similar, right, is you're looking at kind of, the flow of the game, how fun is it? And that's something that's going to be the same between both tabletop and video game. And with tabletop, I think that flow can be even more important, because you have to worry about like how fiddly are the physical pieces? How many times do you have to shuffle your deck? Like, what kind of downtime are you working with? Are the turns simultaneous? Is it like 8 players and you have to wait, an hour for the round to go back around? Whereas I think with video games, the feedback's more immediate, right? So that's one thing that's kind of advantageous to video games, unless you're, playing like Chess by Mail or something, or like what was that fake Advance Wars for PSP where you could play turns by mail, that kind of thing. But so I think like the big things are like game flow, and then some games, again, visually are like a little more akin to a tabletop game as well. You think about your strategy games, your RPGs, those sorts of things. Just visually, it's easier to overlay kind of those things on each other. Your strategy games are basically going to be like chess, right? Just extrapolated with other things like tacked on and added in. RPGs are RPGs, it's just how crafty is your DM versus you have an art department. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think talking about strategy games, I think that's another place where video games and tabletop games have a lot in common. And like, I think, again, a big influence, like D&D was also a big influence on video games. I think these sort of war games were a very big influence on video games, and like Warhammer or BattleTech all these sort of, the mini games that people play physically. Not only literally have they made lots of Warhammer and BattleTech video games, but just, I think when you think about something like Fire Emblem or Civilization, like
StarCraft,
Warcraft, right? Like all these games, video games borrowed elements, borrowed grid movement, and evolved those things a little bit, and also did, and when it's digital, you can do different things. But another like personal anecdote one of the first PC games. I don't know if it's actually true. That's not true, but I played on PC the very first BattleTech PC game as a kid, which was called the Crescent Hawks Inception. I didn't know anything about what BattleTech was. I don't even know why we had that game. I guess my older brothers must have gotten it or something. And I remember spending just hours never progressing in that game because number one, I think it's actually really hard. I was in preparation for this episode. I kind of got sucked down a rabbit hole of watching people play it on YouTube when I should have been doing other things and being like, but also like being like reading people's comments being like, yeah, I remember playing this game as a kid. It's hard, even if you know what to do. And I didn't know what to do. But it just is an example of, I think, that, you know, these sort of turn-based and grid-based strategy games we have owe a lot to all these old war games, and that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on that, or is anybody here ever played? I've never actually played a Warhammer or anything like that. Jeff, did you ever dabble in any of that?
That's yeah. So one of my buddies, coworker and friend, was like, "Hey, if you were going to play a Warhammer faction, what would it be?" I'm like, I feel like this is a trap, but probably Tyranids. And they're like, okay, cool, because my partner wants to do the ultimate box, and they want the Space Marines to turn into Blood Angels. So we can go halvesies, and you can take the Tyranids. And then a couple $100 later, now I've got a Tyranids army. So yeah, we played that. And before that, there were some other ones like War Machine, which was a little bit smaller scale. I got into in the mid 2000s. Basically steampunk Warhammer with a little more magic. But yeah, it's one of those. I was more interested in Warhammer, almost more from the video game side, though, because I didn't have to paint it.
Oh my
and
gosh.
buy 5,000 of them
yes,
and get the codexes. Yeah.
My trauma thanks you.
Dawn of War 2, I think, was kind of like my big introduction into 40K. Had a girlfriend at the time who was into the Warhammer Age of Reckoning, the MMO. But it's interesting too, because like we think of Warhammer as that tactical, like top-down, like battlefield, like pushing minis around. But then you've got your games like Space Marine 1 and 2 that are just like essentially Gears of War light and just doing amazing things, bringing that into a different perspective just to see how they kind of like influence the other things. And I'm playing Space Marine 2. I'm just like, oh, I don't have that unit in my army yet. I should get a set of those guys.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way that video games have influenced tabletop games, right? By allowing these IPs, these worlds that were originally, you know, just minis and played in a certain way to have variants that are played more like action games or anything, right? And then you see the opposite too, where like, I don't know, some franchise will then make a strategy game, right? Like that feels more like a tabletop game. And I can't think of a great example right now, but where like, you know, some game that might've been an action game first, and then they turn it into that for a version of it or something.
Kind of Binding of Isaac 4 Souls was like kind of a, you could argue an action game, and then they turned it in kind of into a card game.
Yeah.
You know? Something like that. Like,
it's like a deck builder, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of, it reminds me of like Munchkin almost. Growing up in high school, I did play a lot of Munchkin. I never really played D&D, but Munchkin is like D&D light, very easy, very accessible. But yeah,
another franchise like that's both video game and tabletop as well, right?
There's a Munchkin video game.
I found out there was
2 years or 3 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay, news to me. All right.
Well,
hey, Summer, you want to play Munchkin video game?
Not particularly,
All
and
right,
kind of
enough.
for the same reason I mentioned, like what I brought up about Cards Against Humanity earlier, is like. My friends who were like nerd light in like high school and college always wanted to play Munchkin. And I don't think that they understood that it was making fun of people like them. They just thought it was like funny D&D without actually being D&D. And I was like, I mean, yeah, okay. Like this is a game we want to play. This is fun. And I ended up getting, pretty sick of it because it was the only game that they ever wanted to play. Sorry, Jordan. I don't want to play Munchkin, the video game.
That's totally fair. I think the reason I liked it is because you could mix all the different card sets together to create some like really weird combinations. But I also, I struggle. And I think this is where video games like are a benefit is teaching people the rules of card games or board games or tabletop RPGs and keeping them interested is so difficult sometimes.
Especially anymore.
Yeah, you get a rule book and it's like this thick and you're like, dude, first of all, I have to understand it. I have to read this book and then watch like 3 YouTube videos to understand the rules to this game. And then I have to explain that to people. So I think like a benefit of like having some of these board games translated to a video game is it's like you can have a tutorial and it's a way more like interactive way to teach people the rules. And then also you don't have to keep track as much of different things that are like within the video game. Like in the video game, it will automatically count things for you versus in real life, you have to like be the banker in Monopoly. You know what I mean?
I have yet to actually play physical Wingspan for that reason. And I want to at some point because like it's gorgeous. We literally own a physical copy of Wingspan, but by God, if I had learned to play it physically first, I think I would have had the absolute like dial-up sounds in my brain, as opposed to like learning to play it with the video game. So accessible and it does all of the math for you. And it's such a fantastic adaptation because it still is just strictly like the board game. It's not. And I mean, like, I guess it's technically an interpretation, but like it's pretty 1-to-1. You just don't have like eggs physically that you might accidentally eat because they're so gorgeous. Instead, it does all of the math for you, and you have soothing bird sounds and bird facts read out loud to you. And if I had, because like now that I've played it digitally, I would like to play it physically. Had that been like flipped, like I don't know. Well, I say that I'm also a huge fan of what is it? Everdell, right? That's the one with the big tree?
Yeah.
Ugh, if that ever becomes a video game, it's over.
Isn't it?
It is.
It is? Oh,
yeah, Direwolf
another one I
Digital
saw
does a lot of those, yeah.
So this is a great natural segue
wait a minute.
to talk.
I need you to know that this is
It is, and it's in a bundle right now. So just
it's in
recently,
a bundle right now, Patrick.
Just recently, I have purchased Wingspan and Root for the video game versions of them. Because
did you get Wingspan on Steam?
Yes,
okay,
for
good.
Steam sales.
I think they're crossplay because I think they go by it.
Oh, they are. Okay.
And the benefit is exactly what you just described. Y'all all just described, right? Like we own a physical copy of Root. We sat down and tried to play it 3 times, and we left it out for days, and eventually it's like, maybe this was just wasted money because I don't know. Every time we look at this, I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend an hour walking through the tutorial. So it's like, but if we buy the video game, we can learn it pretty quickly, and then maybe we'll just want to play that. But maybe someday we'll get out the physical one and enjoy it because, I think it is such a better way to learn, to have that. And now, like Jeff was hinting at, there are these publishing companies that publish a lot of these big, cool board games to make video game versions of them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a place we're really seeing this lately, I feel like.
Yeah. Like the Root, the Everdell, like Direwolf Digital. And Direwolf is also a board game developer, publisher. But they're digital. They've been doing a lot of the adaptations like the Root, Everdell, Dune Imperium. I don't think they're Scythe Digital, but they did Clank. So like a bunch of stuff that's like tabletop things that might take a while to teach. The games, rules-wise, are functionally 1-to-1. So you can learn that instead of, teaching your wine-drunk parents at 10 p.m. the copy of Wingspan you got them for, Mother's Day. And, let's just crack open another bottle of wine. We'll have our third for the night, while we're trying to learn this. And I'm just like, yeah, that's the right one. Good job. Yeah.
It's true. I think we've all been there. I mean, I like tabletop games, but that is objectively, I think, one of the hardest parts about them is learning the rules and then conveying it to everybody there and making sure they have the patience. And I do think a video game makes that so much more accessible, almost to the point where I'm like, they should just make little pack-in, like interactive type things somehow that you can go to, you know, like with a link or something, like to learn a game.
Remember when things came with a CD and they put it in your
Or a
computer?
VHS tape?
And or a VHS tape. They gave you instructions on how to do something.
So there was a trend for a little while of app-assisted board games. So you had like Star Wars Imperium, Descent 3rd edition, I think is one of the more recent, Mansions of Madness 2nd edition, where you'd have like the app is free. You can buy like microtransactions that add more like digital content, but don't make you need to buy physical stuff. But also if you get physical stuff, you can just tell the app, oh yeah, I bought this physical expansion. So like for Mansions of Madness, it would just say like, all right, here's the room you put down. If you interact with this corner of the map tile, press this button on your iPad or your Steam browser or whatever. And then it basically walks you through everything, just tells you what dice to roll and if you good, bad, whatever. And it'll also like, it narrates the story for you. And even outside of the digital thing, for like the companion apps, there's an app called DieZed, so Diced, but with a Z, that does walkthrough tutorials. So you'll like, I just picked up Tiny Epic Cthulhu, and to learn how to play it, I just like booted up the tutorial, didn't even crack open the rules, and it just walks you through setup, like, you know, step by step. Walks you through like a turn. It tells you like, okay, now player 2, it's your turn. Roll the dice, do this. Which has been pretty popular. It's just got ads like every, 5 pages worth of tutorial it does. But yeah, then it just has the digital rule book that you can, like search like, oh shoot, what do I do when the token bag is empty? And you just search bag, it pulls it up in the rules.
See, that's like what I would want, because like I even get tired just watching a YouTube video of somebody explaining it. Like I need it to be interactive. Like my brain has been rotted by too many video games over the years, especially Nintendo games where they over tutorialize everything. Like I don't know, but I just like, I do love the physicality of a board game. Like I grew up, my mom and I would just play a ton of board games all the time, all different kinds. And even now it's like, I love just going to the game store and just like looking at all the board games that I know I'm never going to play because I can never convince 3 other people to learn an insane amount of rules to play some esoteric game. But like, I love just looking, and there's like so many board games now. Like it's kind of crazy. Like just the shelf behind you is like such
this is
a
my
testament.
B shelf. This was I rearranged this for the pod.
Oh my gosh.
So like around the corner in the living room is the games I normally play, which is one of these plus 2. 2 Billy bookcases. Yeah.
I become good friends with people like you. I have a hard time committing to buying board games. I become friends with people who have shelves like that, so I can just go to their house and they can tell me what game I'll like to play.
Yeah.
We have a pretty decent collection, and that's in thanks to my brother-in-law, who has a collection like Jeff's and who always gives us a new one for every holiday. So like he's like such a big enthusiast. He not only buys them for himself, he buys them for us too. And but bringing back to this, you talking about the app, I have played a game that uses an app for different things, and that makes me think about that sort of weird space that could exist in theory, and probably there are examples of like a video game board game, like where some elements require digital things and some elements require physical things. I'm thinking of, it's like not exactly this, but something like Jackboxes feels close to that. You know what I mean? Like maybe where there's a board and you roll on it, and then there's a digital thing you do. And I don't know if there are a lot of examples of that.
There was, so Simon, or used to be Cool Mini or Not, and just changed their name to Simon after doing a miniature rating site. They're now a publisher. They were experimenting with something. It sounded like Temu, but it's not. I think it was like Tegu, where it was actually like a board that was connected to like electronics that had sensors. So you would lay your board game pieces over it. The dice had sensors as well that could detect like what side it was on. Miniatures would have like, magnets or NFC, whatever in them. I don't think it went anywhere because I think the general board game community kind of was rejecting it en masse as just like I don't want to spend $100 for the system when the board game is the system, right? And then have to buy the board games for it. But that was an interesting thing. But even the app-based ones like Mansions of Madness or tying directly into video games, the XCOM board game required that app to play. So you did need to you could save your space in the app, but the XCOM one actually had like timers counting down for like things, and it would keep track of like a lot of the stats you would normally have in your base in XCOM. Fantasy Flight did a lot of interesting video game licenses. Like I think they were kind of like the first hobby board games I got into, like not the, Hasbro, like Risk, Monopoly, Parcheesi, those kind of ones. Like I started with Arkham Horror, so most people do like a Catan or something, a little more accessible. And I just dove in the deep end, like, okay, we got like 4 hours to kill. Here's 15 decks of cards and this crazy thing going on. But then my second one was the World of Warcraft board game. And I didn't really like WoW, but I liked the idea of like all these toys that I'm moving around the board and the way the systems interacted. And they had an interesting thing where they would do things like a lot of their licensed properties, like their StarCraft board game was Twilight Imperium Light. So basically, instead of taking 12 hours to play, it took 5. Or the Gears of War board game, which I still have in my closet. Actually, that may have been an original one because that was the first time I had seen a deck of AI cards to control the enemies where you didn't need a player playing offensively as like a DM against the other players. But things like the Doom board game were adapted off of their Descent system. So they'd done some really interesting, like taking games they had developed for their own original IP and then using those as a starting off point to then build a video game licensed one from.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a natural seg to talk about this area that's existing now, right? That's like tons of licensed video board games that are based on video games, right? Like behind you, I can see Dead Cells. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Bloodborne, Dark Souls.
Dark Souls, the card game. I have a stack
that's
part of my. Yeah, that's one of them. This is Bloodborne.
Oh,
so it's a big game.
Well, there's Bloodborne, the card game.
Oh my!
Which is different from Bloodborne, the board game.
Okay.
So Bloodborne, the board game, the way I got it was at a local shop. The only way they had it available was like the Kickstarter all-in pledge for their first wave. So I was like, okay, I'm all in. So it's the base game and then content expansions with like bosses, boards, and everything, and enemies for like, oh, well, you're out of the castle. Here's the swamp. Here's the, the Moonchild. Here's all of these things you recognize from the game that are just, each in their own individual package.
That's pretty funny.
Card game is it's a really good deck builder. They adapted into a competitive dungeon crawler, and that's like you can play that in about half hour, 45 minutes if you're like new to it. Whereas the board game, like a 2-hour play, probably.
What are some of your favorites, Jeff? I know you've played probably more than we have, but I would be curious to y'all too. But
Bloodborne, the card game, probably one of my favorite just board games in general, just because I really like deck building as a mechanic, like Dominion, games like that. Slay the Spire, for instance, as a video game, which has then had a board game adaptation of a video game that was a board game. So it's like this crazy, like, Boolean strip Ouroboros thing. But yeah, Bloodborne, the card game, it's just, if you've played a deck builder, you kind of know how to play it. It's just got a few things that are kind of themed for Bloodborne. We played a good amount of Dead Cells. That one didn't try to be like I guess you call it like a 1-to-1 like mechanical adaptation, which Dark Souls kind of stumbled into and suffered from, where it's kind of, you're just like moving around. You do an encounter. It's 3 rounds of combat, and then just move on, and then either die or fight a boss. But they add legacy mechanics, which are kind of campaign, but it changes the game. So there's a little slot where you like permanently cull cards under all the inserts, add new cards to your deck, unlock new biomes to play. But it's one where, unlike D&D, like anybody can just join in on your next run. And it's got that same Dead Cells like next run. Like, okay, we died in like 20 minutes. It'll take a minute to reset this, and we'll just go again and see how far we get. But the other one, I think, that's probably been almost as much as Bloodborne, the card game, is the Dead Cells board game. And that one, again, not quite a one-to-one. It's a hidden movement game, but the hidden movement is just done with cards. So you take your map of your Dead Cells thing, and they just have, each location has a different kind of color path connecting it. You have cards in your hand that just say things like crouch, run, jump, walk, and those are just the same colors as the paths. So you're at a location, there's the killer, the 4 players, or however many players are playing against the killer. All the tabletop talk is open, so players that are the survivors can't like whisper to each other. They have to say whatever they're planning in front of the killer, but they can, bluff, that sort of thing. But like this path is only connected to blue and green, so those are the only ways they can go. So there's kind of like a planning, guessing. It's wild, like how simple they got it, but how well it adapts the video game to the tabletop.
Can you say what are you talking about right now, Jeff? I think you might have said the wrong thing.
Oh, sorry, not Dead Cells. Dead by Daylight. Too many games with dead in the title.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Dead by Daylight, not Dead Cells.
Right. Okay.
You said killer, and I was like,
Yeah.
wait, hang on.
That sounds like a different one. Yeah.
Well, Jordan or Summer, have y'all ever played a board game that's based on a video game IP?
Yeah, I mean, I played The Binding of Isaac 4 Souls.
Right.
I talked a little bit earlier. I really enjoy that one because it is not a one-to-one adaptation in my mind, but it is like it spiritually like Binding of Isaac, where you're going through it and you're collecting items, and then the way the items all interact with each other makes the game either have like really broken builds or you're kind of just screwed, like as far as what your character can do throughout the game. And I really enjoyed that one. That one's a really fun one to play with like friends. And I've actually something we haven't really talked about yet is a Tabletop Simulator, and just like the amount of insane like games that you can get using that. And so I've actually played a lot of that game in a Tabletop Simulator with friends online.
That's another like a video game based on or a board game based on a video game that you've now turned back into a video game of the board game, right?
Yeah. The dialogue back and forth between tabletop games and board games and video games is infinite at this point. It's like definitely video games were directly ripping from these games, but now it just keeps going back and forth at a pace that I don't think any of us can really keep up. But I think that's the main one I've played. I've probably played some other ones. I played like a Cowboy Bebop game once. I can't really think. There's just so many different licensed games now that it's like hard to keep track. But I think that's the main one I can think of is The Binding of Isaac 4 Souls.
We've got a Tetris board game that my brother-in-law gave my kid, but nobody will play here because I can just beat everybody in it. And I guess it's not fun if I win every time. But it's an okay board game, I guess. That's one I think of.
Yeah. I tried to play the Final Fantasy trading card game when that came out, because it came out when I was in college and when I was going to the comic book store all the time playing tabletop game. Like I was playing HeroClix, and they were like, "This is new. We thought we'd order some. You like Final Fantasy?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it." And I was like, "This is dumb. I want to play HeroClix." And that was my experience. Yeah. I don't think I've played anything else based off of a video game though in that direction. Yeah.
One thing I definitely wanted to say, since we're a Nintendo podcast, before we sort of head into our final thoughts here, is I like in doing some research for this episode, I found out about an old Nintendo game that I was not familiar with. It was developed by Rare for the NES, came out in like the late 80s, called Anticipation.
Okay.
It looks really interesting. It's like it was marketed as a video board game, Nintendo's first video board game. And it's kind of like you use the NES and you could have 4 people playing if you had one of those adapters, but I think you could also just pass the controllers back around. It kind of played like Pictionary or Trivial Pursuit or something, but just like an early Nintendo attempt at video game board games. And obviously the Mario Party series is really an example of like a weird mash of video games, board games. And then we'd be remiss if we didn't mention one of David's favorite games, which I have actually been playing lately, which is Clubhouse 51 Worldwide Classics, which is another example of like my kid being able to like experiment in chess or something like that without like me having to be there like, no, you can't move that way. You know, like the game only allows you to move. And I think another example of how video games can teach these classic board games that are complicated, right?
Yeah.
Tanks,
for better
Chinese
or worse.
checkers.
Yeah.
Hanafuda.
Because then I think it's sometimes like it's like we open up backgammon and I'm like, I don't know how to play backgammon. And we're just messing around. And it's like, I'm not really learning. I'm just I'm like, you know.
Yeah.
The first Clubhouse games on DS used to be one of our favorite waiting in line for like a movie or an event or a con. Because you only needed one cartridge. It had the AirPlay thing or the SharePlay thing. So like as long as one person had a cartridge to host, you could play. It had the like built-in Picto chat as well. So again, you can imagine what was going on with a lot of like, 20-year-old guys. But, it's still like, it was great. You could just draw, you could play. And I think it even had like a close resume function, even if you're doing the share play. So like we could close it and then, we're meeting back up for this event in the con. Like, let's all continue our game of tangrams or whatever we were playing.
Very nice.
But also the other Nintendo one that I'm surprised isn't on this list, since Game Boy Color has been the Pokemon trading card game.
Oh yeah.
The video or the card game first with Pokemon based on Pokemon. So you got a video game based card game. Then Game Boy Color had the card game based on the video game that is now a card game video game again. And that's had like multiple iterations too. Like we've got the new Pokemon TCG that all of my friends are spending too much money on. Like just the trading cards as digital, like SNK did one with like a Capcom versus SNK trading card game on Neo Geo Pocket Color and DS, which is fighting game turned into card game before there were those on the market.
Yeah.
But it's...
I didn't realize we were talking about card games.
Well,
we never got into that.
We didn't. There's so much to talk about here, and I think we do kind of have to wind down. But yeah, I think card games do count, and I think like Jordan really put it really well, which is like that this has just been a dialogue between tabletop games and video games, like that. The mediums have influenced each other, and I think about some of the most big video games of the last few years. I'm thinking about Among Us being so big. That's basically a digitized in-person game. Yeah. And Balatro being so big last year is, using literal card poker elements in a new way. Just so many. I feel like the genre of RTSs is entirely based on like moving pieces around and stuff. And it's just like so much of video games really is.
Well, I think also specifically with card games, like, and adapting them into a digital form is you're able to do things with randomization that you could never possibly do in real life. Like I think of, I played a decent amount of Hearthstone, and some of the cards are like, generate one random of this type of card. And it's like, you could never do that in a physical game. So it just like opens up this interesting opportunity of like Hearthstone is essentially a Magic the Gathering clone, but it's able to take it like one step further. And same with like Balatro. It's like, it's poker, but it's not like any poker game you've ever played in your entire life. So it's just like really fascinating to see like how the digital structure is able to like push certain types of games into a different direction.
Yeah. You've got like cards inspiring a lot of, indie games for a while, like Slay the Spire, Inscription, Balatro, but also, like how many werewolf knockoffs are there? I mean, Among Us, like any social deduction game that's come out on Steam over the last 5 years is basically just werewolf / mafia. Town of Salem being one of those, which I think is also a card game too. Throne of Lies, like there's a few, like a lot of my buddies tried to get me to play during the pandemic. It's like, we can't play werewolves, so let's get on Steam and do this. You gotta have your camera on.
I wanted to jump back, I guess, like to Nintendo just really quickly, because I am remembering now there was a fan-made Fire Emblem tabletop game that I had heard.
Here.
You have it, Anna's Round Table. Oh my gosh, which print?
First.
The original? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're incredibly lucky because Nintendo Ninjas came for them last year. Now, that being said, it looks like that they're putting out that they removed like the words Fire Emblem from it and they're just calling it Anna's Round Table now. And I'm like, oh, I am pre-ordering this new reprint because I was so mad at myself. Because I've just heard incredible things about this game. And it's like this. I love Fire Emblem fandom, passion, love projects. Like I love like investing in that stuff. So I am so glad that they found a way to work around that. I'm like probably going to go ahead and pre-order this right now because I had a lot of friends talk like speak very highly to this. And I know that there's supposed to be like a lot of updated like expansions that I can get for it too.
Yeah. Well, in the first edition, I think they were still figuring out some of just like the press on like the card stock. So there's like the second edition had a little bit better like color balancing on some of the art. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Brother Ming, who's the developer, has been like started doing a lot of fan stuff. Like I had this Persona 5 fan game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think they have a Genshin Impact one too.
Yeah, there's the Genshin Taro I think his most recent game that's based on a property. And then he started doing, I think because of the DMCAs, whatever, the Devil May Cry Authority, when they take it down. Started to do more original stuff. So he has like a non-licensed one that's like his own IP that's like artists battling with, paintbrushes and stuff. But even started with like Advance Wars print and play games, which is the first time I'd heard about his work.
Yeah. Oh, this is bad. I am seeing now that they've got a Kickstarter for an Astarian dice set that comes in like a coffin. Oh no, I didn't need to be reminded of this group.
Fire Emblem metal dice that he had put out too.
Do it.
Oh no.
Just for time reasons, everybody, I think we should start to wrap this up. Is there anything about tabletop games influencing video games or vice versa that y'all want to make sure and squeeze in, or any final thoughts before we close this out?
I think for me, just having played, like having video game based board games as part of like my whole board game, like journey of stuff I play, I think it's interesting to see like where they come and go. But I think the best adaptations from the video to board game side are when they kind of try to get the vibe, but not do the direct, like mechanical bit for bit adaptations. Mm-hmm. But I also think like just having the direct one-to-one video game versions is also like conversely very important because it's just the best way to teach it. And it takes up way less space to have your digital copy of Root than your, Root and 5 expansion boxes underneath.
Yeah.
And it's a little easier to set up and tear down. So I think it's really cool seeing how both have kind of like done great things for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I just want to throw out there too. I used to think I was a person that just couldn't understand the instructions for like hobby tabletop games. And I I don't know, maybe my brain just like needed to finish developing or something, or maybe just like I think there is like a tabletop, like a hobby tabletop game out there for everybody. And maybe you just need to find the one that like is actually interesting to you. Because there's definitely ones out there that I don't care about. Like I actually don't. I know I had mentioned like Catan earlier, but like it's not my favorite. Like, it's not what I'm clamoring to play. It was just like what I wanted to play because it was something more advanced that other people were playing. Like now it's definitely not what I want to play. Like I love, like I was saying, like Wingspan, Everdell. But I also do enjoy like crunchier things too sometimes. It's just, like, there's so much out there. Like do some exploring, get the digital version first. There's so many, there's so much out there now.
All right. Well, I think that was a great conversation. We'll stop it there. Obviously, there's so much more about this we could have talked about. So many little niche parts of it we could have gone down. But if you out there listening have any thoughts on tabletop games and how they've influenced video games, or, you know, your favorite tabletop game that's based on a video game, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So definitely leave a comment and we'll try to shout you out next time. And we're going to take another short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the games that we've been playing recently. The main game that I wanted to talk about this week is It Takes Two. I have been spending too much money on Steam recently with bundles and sales, which is, I feel like I go through these phases where I'm like, I buy all these games and then I stop because I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm in a buy all these games phase. And I heard that It Takes Two had a 80% off sale this week. So I went ahead and purchased it because it's been on my list to play with my kid. And I'm so glad I did. This has been like, we have dropped all the other games we're playing and really just been playing this exclusively. Aww. What a fantastic game. Like I've heard that. I mean, it won Game of the Year, right? Like a couple years ago, and I'd heard really good things, but I get it now. Like, it's got really good platforming, but it's also just got lots of really interesting mechanics, and it mixes it up. And I mean, if you played it, you know, like there's different areas where each character gets a different accessory that you have to use. And it's got really good puzzle design. It's just really satisfying to play with somebody else. Yeah. And it's not easy, but it's not hard either, right? At least that's been my experience. Like, it's been a good middle ground, because sometimes like playing Donkey Kong Country Returns with my kid has been a little frustrating. And so like, but playing this game has been just pure joy. So, I didn't realize what the theme of the game was either.
Yeah. Like when you were leading into this, I was expecting you to say that you were playing it with your wife, and then you said your son. And I was like, oh, all right.
No, it would have been more appropriate maybe, but also I don't think she would have been as into it. But also I just think it's funny that it's about a divorce and a kid. And I'm like, oh, we're not getting a divorce, buddy. Let's just keep playing the game.
Oh, yeah. It's like, it wasn't you trying to like broach the subject. Or
right. Like, that would be an awful thing to do to your kid, right?
Something that I kind of want to touch on is it's so interesting to hear you talk about this. And like, I'm so interested in you playing this with your son, because you already have so much experience playing games with your son all of the time. And I know that the point of this game is that the entire intent is to like develop cohesion between two people playing a game. And most of what I have heard from folks who have played this game is they were playing it to like save their relationship, right? It's like people I know who actually literally were on the brink of divorce were like, well, maybe we're going to play It Takes Two, or like, actually heard that from people. And like this game, like literally saving relationships. But like, I feel like it's maybe it's different for you because you're playing it with somebody who you do play games with that maybe aren't developed in as much of a way as this game is to be like good for two people.
I do remember Matthew on this podcast talking about this game and saying they played it with their partner, and I don't think they were in any threat of breaking up or anything at that time. Like it was just something they played together, and I know his partner doesn't play as many games. And so I think it's also a way maybe for people who want to get their partner who doesn't play games into playing games, but I think it might be a little tricky for those people,
right?
That like have no game experience. So
totally.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what the best use case is, but it's just a great co-op game.
Yeah. Super looking forward to their next game.
I'm going to go next because I have still really only been playing Balatro. I've had like not a ton of time to play video games or to jump into a new like single player game. So I'm still on my challenge mode hunt. I'm still trying to get all 20 challenges done. I'm a little scared because I'm getting, I'm getting through it. It took me a while to do number 11, which is typecast, where after ante 4, you can't like change your jokers. So it's like if you don't have a good like setup by that time, you might as well just abandon the run, which is actually kind of nice because you can kind of figure it out by that point. And then I also beat Inflation, which was a little tougher because everything becomes more expensive. It felt like real life, honestly, but everything becomes more expensive the more you buy. So like everything, like if you buy something, you have to be really sure about what you're buying. Otherwise, you might just raise the price to where something later on down the line comes along that you really want to buy, but you don't have enough money. So the next one I have up is Bram Poker. Great pun. Just wanted to give that pun a shout out on the pod. But I talked to someone recently who was like, yeah, like up until about 15, they're like, it takes you a little while. And then like they get really hard. And then the last 3 are like insanely difficult. So I'm kind of not looking forward to that, but also very curious to see what that means. But anyway, I'm on the Balatro train. No end in sight. What have y'all been playing?
Besides, I'm still, I'm mostly playing Metaphor Refantasio still. Don't have much to say about that at this point. I'm still loving it. But what I do just exactly similarly want to quickly shout out because one of my friend groups decided they wanted to start a game club, not a full JRPG club, because they wanted to do like games that were like easily digestible and would just be like fun to have like quick commentary like about like every week or so. And a friend suggested milk inside a bag of milk inside a bag of milk and milk outside a bag of milk outside a bag of milk. This is the name of the game because it was on sale in the Nintendo eShop. And it's not long. If you like, if you like visual novel, psychological horror kind of stuff, then, or just like the horrors that Canadians go through regularly, because like, bags of milk. No, I don't have like a lot to say about this on this podcast specifically. Just wanted to shout it out because it is in fact a game that I've played. And I literally cannot say anything else about it without like entirely spoiling it. So like if any of what I just said interests you, play it and message me. Otherwise I am playing the newest Fitness Boxing 3. I know that there was like, I don't want to say discourse, but just like, oh, is there enough new in this game? Like, I personally think that the like quickness of getting into the workouts in this specific iteration, it's just to me, it's faster, and like that's important to me with a fitness game. I hate having to click through a million things that in order to get to the workout. And I mean, just new music, new trainers, it does look nicer, honestly. I'm not having all of the latency issues, like switching from my TV to playing it in like, what would you call it? Not tabletop mode, but because I don't play it on a tabletop, like I set it up on a counter or whatever. But yeah, like I don't have to like change my settings when I do that, which I used to have to do that with Fitness Boxing 2. So just like little quality of life things like that. I do feel like it's worth getting it. That being said, I know that the Fist of the North Star one is $5 right now. So like, if you're just looking for an intro to the franchise, it's so funny calling it a franchise. If you're looking for an intro to the franchise, just get the Fist of the North Star one.
Jeff, what about you? What have you been playing?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, the Fist of the North Star thing threw me off. I'm very interested in that. That's one of the first anime I watched when I was too young to like be watching it.
Yeah.
Like my first anime were like Akira and Vampire Hunter D when I was in 5th grade.
Oh no.
Like
yeah.
Yeah. Fist of the North Star very close after that. So I was like, yeah. But no, over the weekend, I played a little of the most recent Monster Hunter beta on Xbox. Wasn't affected by the PlayStation, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not like, there's some interesting stuff. There's some bridging between like Rise with like the visual fidelity of World. I still think Rise is like the best one they've done since like 4 really brought me into the series in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little like bit of, I think, quality of life stuff that's kind of getting in the way of playing. Like when you hop on your little like chocobo to like chase things, it does a lot of like running for you, which I think is weird, but combat feels good. I don't know if I like the open worldiness of it, but I don't know how much of that is beta. I felt the same way about Rise coming from 4, so I think I'm going to like, it's a day one purchase for me no matter what. I think I'm going to like it, but I don't know. It's new, so it feels weird. And then I was thinking of 2 other things. Quickly, there's Blade Chimera. I've been playing on Switch. Symphony of the Night knockoff, but cyberpunky. It's really fun. If you like Symphony of the Night, you'll probably get a kick out of it. And then rehooked up my PS2 because a buddy let me borrow Castlevania Lament of Innocence, which I'd never really gotten into. And that was the first non-64 3D Castlevania. So you can see kind of like some interesting like ideas brewing. They're not like all the way there, but it's better in retrospect than I remember it being when I had first played it. So I think I had figured like Devil May Cry is like the perfect 3D Castlevania. And then Lament of Innocence felt like a weird step back. But going back to play it, I'm like, I don't know. I'm digging this. And it may just be that the music is so good that it just puts me in the vibe. But yeah, playing a PS2 game through, an adapter on my 4K TV is real weird.
Yeah. Lament of Innocence is a fascinating game. Like I played it when it came out. I really liked that one. And there's another couple like 3D Castlevanias around that time. Cause yeah, I had a similar experience where I was like, we've already moved past this and this feels like dated, but it just came out. It was like very strange. And then they made some like other really weird ones, but that's cool to hear. I kind of makes me want to go back and try it again as well.
Yeah, I'll probably play my Xbox copy that I still own of Curse of Darkness afterwards.
That's the one.
Yep.
That's the one, dude. Curse of Darkness is so sick.
Then there were the great handheld ones like the EGA, GBA, and DS ones. And then last good 3D one was the first of the ones by Mercury Steam, who did the last Metroid 2D game.
Sorry, that's where we diverge. I like tried those games and I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I don't know, something about it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I love the first one. It was just God of War with a whip, That's
totally.
And I was fine with that,
Yeah, I just wasn't good enough. Sorry, this is not a Castlevania podcast now, or maybe it is.
Yep, switching now, talking Castlevania.
Well, I think that's going to do it then for this episode. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on and talking to us about tabletop games.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Always happy to gush about it whenever I can.
Thanks also to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. Thanks to all of our patrons over on Patreon. If you're looking for me online, you can find me as PDYX.
You can find me at Weebwitched.
You can find me at Bordan.
What about you, Jeff? Where can folks find you online?
I think I'm on the Blue Skis. What's my handle again? I don't social media super hard. Let's see. It is L-Jeffe, so El Jefe on Blue Sky.
There you go. Follow Jeff. He's a great artist and designer, and you'll see some of his work in my game when it comes out someday. But thanks for listening to this episode. Really appreciate it. If you're looking for the show online, you can find us as Switch Headz on the Blue Sky. You can find us as Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook and so on. Definitely drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. And as David says, that's going to do it for this episode. Remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, take care of one another. And we're going to have another great episode next week. We'll see you then. Until next time. Bye-bye.